They have a combined 12 years in the National Football League. They combined for 65 career sacks, 232 tackles, 1 Pro Bowl selection, and 1 Employee of the Month award.
That's just a straight shooter with upper management written all over him.
It's Train and Grose on the All AZ Podcast Network.
Welcome in episode 66 of Train and Grose. Bertrand Berry, Mike Grose, Sean Crespin, coming to you from our respective home bases tonight. As B-Train is in the man cave in the East Valley. I'm here in Central Phoenix. And Sean Crespin, as always, holding it down for us. B-Train, good to see you this week, my man. How are you?
Always a pleasure, brother. I'm feeling good. You know, I got the fan on because it's toasty here in the desert, and I'm not sure what we're going to get the rest of the week, but hey, we got heat today, so we'll deal with that, and we'll just carry on until we get otherwise.
Yeah, we got a little bit of rain yesterday. It was nice, and now the sun's coming back. But as we always do, episode 66, and I consult the interwebs and find that, again, like last week, when Elvin Bethea was a universal first choice for number 65.
Houston Oilers.
Yeah, right. I don't think we'll get any argument on number 66, Ray Nitschke.
Yeah, that is. Also, you got Mario Lemieux.
Well, you know, we for whatever reason, pretty much ignore
keep it football
hockey
for the most part.
Yeah, we ignore hockey on this podcast. You know,
but we don't ignore the great ones though. Not the great ones. You know, Mario Lemieux is a great one.
I'll go there. But keeping in the football theme, Ray Nitschke, of course, from 58 to 72, like he played in the – there were no rules protecting players in 58 to 72. Like they went all in.
They were like they were like hockey back then. Like they didn't have big face masks. They had teeth missing. They didn't care, man. They just showed up. They smoked at halftime. They did everything they had to do, and they went to work during the week. So, you know, it was a whole different league. It was a whole different experience back then. Shout out to those guys because they paved the way to what we enjoy now.
I love the old NFL films where they do, you know, obviously you see the game action, but just the sideline shots of the guys sitting on the bench and the gnarled up hands and the tape. And like you said, you see guys smoking on the bench, drinking a cup of coffee on the bench. Who knows what else, but just the difference in the setup in those old stadiums. And I don't think they filmed any of the games in September and October. They were all November, December games when it was cold and rainy and muddy. And just a completely different setup back in the day.
Yeah, it just seemed like everything needed to be in black and white. Everybody it looked like they were about 60 years old playing football. I mean, you know, they had the gray hair, you know, a few teeth missing. You know, it looked like they were, you know, filming at the you know the home for those that are elder. You know what I mean? For the advanced age, we'll say we'll leave it right there.
All right, before we jump into it this week, B-Train, I'm not going to tell people why because they can go back and listen to episode 65 for context on this one. But thanks to you, I downloaded and was listening to Kashmir as loud as my car radio would allow this week driving home from work. So thank you very much.
Hey, brother, the violins, man, they get you going every time. I mean, it's one of those classic songs that anytime you hear it, you already know it takes you back to a certain moment where you felt that adrenaline rush and you get those feels all over again, man. It's certain songs and certain music just never dies. It always will live on, and Kashmir is one of those for me.
Yeah, growing up, I was not a huge Led Zeppelin fan, but there's certain songs from, you know, when you were younger that you just listen to, and maybe even now you appreciate it more than you're older. So anyways, if you want to know what we're talking about, why we brought up Kashmir, go back and listen to the start of last week's podcast. Fast forward past the Girl Scout cookie talk, and you can get into it and figure out what we're talking about. But big news, and we typically start with the NFL because it's the gift that keeps on giving. And, you know, I was telling Sean Crespin, I'm working on my list. What are we going to talk about? And, oh, by the way, Bruce Arians retired again today. Bruce Arians dips out, and he's done.
You know, I look at it and I think it makes sense because, one, I think he understood that it wasn't going to be a long-term deal to go back to Tampa Bay. I think he wanted to be with a quarterback that kind of had the same mindset as him, come in, be in the end of my career, and let's try to run this thing and put together a nice little team and coaching staff. And I think he played it perfectly, because the way that it shakes out now, they're going to have to hire from within, because all of the coaching vacancies have been filled. There's no real coaching spots left to go to other teams. And so I think this was kind of a master plan, if you will, by Bruce Arians to make sure that one of his assistants got an opportunity to be a head coach. He waited till the last minute to do this, right before you get into the draft, that you've already let free agency come and go, and now you're just waiting on the draft and the start of OTAs and mini camps and all that kind of good stuff. And I think to keep that continuity together of that coaching staff, I thought this was a brilliant move by him. And BA just seems to always get it right.
He actually said too, Grose, sorry to cut you off there, but in his parting ways, said, I wanted to ensure when I walked away that Todd Bowles would have the best opportunity to succeed. Todd's going to be the guy taking over. So he said, I wanted to ensure when I walked away that Todd Bowles had the best opportunity to succeed. So many head coaches come into situations where they're set up for failure. I didn't want that for Todd. And of course, we know Todd went to New York, had a 10-win season his first year there, but really there was no framework for any long-term success. He was going to have to build it from the ground up, wasn't able to do so. So here he goes. And Bruce obviously has a lot of respect for Todd Bowles, has coached with him for how many years now, and puts him in a situation where you got the greatest of all time at quarterback, you got a defense and a roster ready to win right now. So here you go, Todd. He's in a great spot.
Well, you remember Todd played for him once upon a time back in Temple, I believe it was. And so they've had a long-standing relationship for decades. And their bond is probably closer than most when you start talking about coaches and head coach and assistant coach. For them to have had that type of history together, of course, it's like his son. He wants his son to be set up in the best way possible so he can go out there and succeed. But I think it's going to be a short-lived, smooth sail, because the minute Tom Brady leaves, again, which I think it'll be next year, then there's going to be that rebuild. And how are they going to be able to keep this roster together after next year when the big ticket actually decides to call it the day in Tom Brady? And now you're looking for the most important position in the game to have to fill in and reload and try to maintain some level of continuity.
And part of the announcement is Bruce Arians is going to stay with the organization in some capacity in the front office. And I can't help but think that, just the way that BA operates and he's not going to come out and send an overt message, but there was some subtle messaging in there around, to the point that, the way you pointed out, B-Train, around how he stepped away at a point in time where, they had to promote from within. And then also talking about when you bring in head coaches, it's typically because the team is struggling, or as Sean pointed out, like the Jets, you just suck as an organization and you're constantly turning through coaches where, did Todd Bowles, even though he did win his first season there, did he really ever have a chance for long-term success as the head coach of the New York Jets? And has anybody else won at the Jets recently? So this is not a Todd Bowles issue at this point. So I think BA just kind of set a little subtle message around this whole diversity hiring and how the transition in coaching staffs typically work in the National Football League. And again, smart enough not to make a huge point about it, but came out, got his man the job, as you just said, but also sent a little bit of a parting message on the way out the door.
Mike, I think, too, you think about this offseason and everything that has gone on. There's been a lot of storylines around this offseason in the NFL, and they do a masterful job of keeping themselves relevant. But remember how we talked about the Rooney Rule and how we talked about how there was a shortage of black coaches hired in the initial process of Black Monday and coaches being fired and then coaches being hired again. There was an absence, and there was a stark absence, and there was this overwhelming feeling that the Rooney Rule had failed overall in what it had set out to do. But now you have a situation where most of his staff was black, and now you've got a coach that had coaching experience as a head coach, has some success as a head coach, and now he gets another opportunity by the fact that you had no other options but to hire from within. And either way that they would have gone, had it been either Byron Leftwich or it'd be Todd Bowles, you were going to get another black head coach in the NFL. So I thought the move was masterful. I thought it was brilliant for a lot of different reasons. But we're not going to just sit here and say because they're black, that's good. These are good coaches, and these were guys that were worthy candidates of being head coaches in the NFL, finally getting an opportunity to have that opportunity again.
Well, I think you see from BA what a lot of people say is the loyalty is huge to him. And I think that transcends at some level the racial issue, right, around whether or not, Todd Bowles or Byron Leftwich, whoever it is. It was his guy. Mm-hmm. It was a guy that played for him in college. It was a guy that was here with him in Arizona when they had success.
Correct.
And so, BA strikes me as somebody who's going to take care of his guys and also protect his legacy a little bit too. And so, this was like I said, it just gets the feel of a calculated decision, but not sometimes you use that term in a negative way. And I don't mean that. I mean that he thought it all the way through. I'm sure the players don't get veto power, but I'm sure he socialized the decision a little bit with some of the leaders on the team. And he's staying with the organization, so he's not leaving. He's not disappearing. It's not like when he left Arizona. He's going to be part of whatever happens in Tampa going forward. And again, happy for Todd Bowles. I mean, everybody who talks about him, says the most positive things about him. And, his name came up, when he didn't get hired by every other team in the NFL this offseason. It's not like this is something from out in left field. So, but you're right. It's going to be short-lived, and they're going to have to put in a rebuild plan at some point when Tom Brady ultimately decides to finally and permanently step away from the game.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't bet against it, but you would think logic would lead you to believe, okay, he's coming back just to scratch that itch one last time. But I'm just glad that they were able to put a winning team around Todd Bowles, and BA was able to stay in the organization to make sure that one of his guys was actually the guy that was going to succeed him as far as getting that opportunity to coach this football team.
In his statement, Bruce Arians thanked the Bidwell family for finally giving him a chance. Obviously it was a long time coming for Bruce Arians. And obviously, very, very thankful also to the ownership there, the Glazer family there in Tampa for giving him an opportunity to come back and ultimately win the Super Bowl. So BA is done again, and we'll see. We'll see short-term and long-term future for Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Mike, as we put a bow on this, what's your legacy of BA? How will he be remembered by you? I know there'll be a national story about BA, but you think about how he first got his opportunity stepping in Indianapolis and getting Coach of the Year, stepping in for his good friend Chuck Pagano, and then ultimately getting the opportunity in Arizona and having that run, that 5-year stretch where he was actually able to get to an NFC Championship game and get to the playoffs a few years, but ultimately going to Tampa to win a Super Bowl.
I think, if you're a fan of the Arizona Cardinals, you have to have a level of appreciation for what BA did, because it's only really been done twice, right? Obviously, the team that you were part of under Ken Wisenhunt, and Ken Wisenhunt, and I know you have your feelings and your thoughts there, but Ken Wisenhunt wasn't nearly the personality that Bruce Arians was. Whatever Ken Wisenhunt was, and I'll leave that up to you to describe and share with us if you wish. BA was a personality unto himself, right? So it was big. It felt like the National Football League while he was here, playing at that level. And to your point, putting it together. And that year they went to the NFC Championship game, then there was expectations, that was never the case here. I've been here for almost 20 some years. I was here for the first run when Jake and everybody made it to the playoffs, made that run and shocked the world when they beat Dallas. They came back. They virtually dismantled that team, let Larry Centers go. And so there was no expectations afterwards. Everybody loved it, Love the fact that they beat the Cowboys. Dave McGinnis is a good guy, and he had his own kind of personality and swagger, but that was the 90s, not what we're used to in the 2010s when BA was here. And then again, Wisenhunt and what you all did, which was the pinnacle, but BA right on the heels there of what he did. But I think bigger personality. And then I think the shock at the way he just kind of walked away here, right? Saw the handwriting on the wall. Carson Palmer left too. And as quick as we were enjoying that, it was over.
I really believe for BA, he will be remembered as a fun-loving coach, a guy that was a straight shooter, that was never afraid to speak his mind and say it in a way that only BA could say it. But I think the one thing that you walk away thinking about BA is he's a winner. Everywhere he went, his teams won, and they love playing for him. And I think that's an important aspect of it, because it's one thing to be a good coach, but people don't love playing for you. BA was a good coach. He had a great coaching staff. He had competent people around him, and guys loved playing for him. And to me, he was the trifecta. He had all those bases covered, and that's why his teams were always competitive, because they were talented, one, but they also loved playing hard for the guy that was in charge because he was a likable personality.
A friend of mine at the day job played for – he didn't play. He was on the roster at Temple. He got injured and spent 2 years under BA at Temple. And we talked about it, said, did you see it then, what turned into? He said, you could see it. Like, he had a full head of hair then. And
he had a mullet, yeah.
But he said, you saw what I remember of him in Philadelphia, and then we had this in the context of the Arizona Cardinals. He said, it is not surprising to see what he has turned into. And casually, he followed the career and saw what BA was doing through the years. So, he had that impact on people all the way back to his college days. And you mentioned it already. Todd Bowles played for him at Temple. So that Temple connection, continued all the way through to the end.
Yeah, and I think his legacy is intact. The fact that he was able to get that championship, I think that really solidified his status among one of the greats in the NFL, and he'll forever be known as a champion. Of course, he won as an assistant with the Pittsburgh Steelers twice, but to get it as a head coach towards the end of his career, I think it was a major cherry on top for Bruce Arians, and I think he can walk away very satisfied with his career and what he was able to accomplish.
Other things real quick, we'll do one of our rapid fire sessions here, B-Train, about things just kind of happening in and around the National Football League. Patrick Peterson says he's going to play another year with the Minnesota Vikings.
Not surprised. I think for Patrick, I know leaving Arizona and going to a new team and a new situation, it had to be a little surreal. And then to actually come back and play said team that you played for all those years, that had to be a little different. I've been in those shoes. But I think for him, the way that the team and the Vikings underachieved to a certain degree, I think he still feels like he can be a major contributor to a playoff type team, and the money's good too. I mean, let's not bury the lead. I mean, he's not coming back to play for free, so if they're going to still give him a contract and still give him a paycheck, then there's no need to ride off into the sunset just yet.
The Buffalo Bills will remain in Western New York. I don't know that there was ever a threat of them going. I know for a while there, and a lot of it is posturing to get a new stadium. And this was a number of years ago. You remember they played games in Toronto. I don't know that was ever serious, but, they like to hold that over. But nonetheless, the Bills will be staying in Western New York.
That was the easiest call of the day, Mike. There was no way that fandom was going to let that team go anywhere else other than right where they are. And it was just a matter of getting the funding right and getting the right numbers to where they wanted it. But the love affair that this city has with this team, I don't think there was any way that they would have let this team go anywhere else. And the way that they've embraced Josh Allen and the rest of that organization, that there was no way that they were going to go play somewhere else.
Isn't it funny how the funding always seems to work out when your team is all of a sudden winning? Yeah. Isn't it funny how all of a sudden people are more open with that checkbook? I mean, I even go back here. Remember when people were struggling to get money here. I think, were you on the team, B-Train, when the big win against Washington, I believe? I think it was maybe right before you when the funding.
No, it was right before me.
Yeah, but
it was right before me.
You had that pick 6 against Washington. You beat one of the best teams in the NFC. Everybody was, oh my gosh, look at this team. They're trending in the right direction. And all of a sudden the funding was available. It's funny how that works, how much winning can play a factor in all that.
Well,
winning solves everything.
The Jets and the Giants use the New York name, but the Bills are the only NFL team to actually play their games in the state of New York. So, I'm sure the politicians always thinking, how do you get the votes and how do you keep the people happy? But I think we all agree the Bills, especially now, we're never going to go anywhere. All right, the next one, B-Train. I don't know how we feel about this because I know we talked about it during the postseason around should both teams get a chance to score, yada, yada. NFL tweaks the rules. They give into – I don't know if they give into pressure from where, but they did, and they tweaked the rules. That way both teams are assured of a possession in overtime. I don't know how I feel about that. Your point, you speak for yourself, but you played on defense, and your position's like, hey, stop them. If you don't stop them, you don't have nothing to talk about.
Mike, this is the official wussification of the NFL. And I don't say that lightly. As a former player, as a guy that earned a living playing on the defensive side, this is a slap in the face to everybody that played on that side of the football, because you just said that the only position that truly really matters is the quarterback position. And yeah, you can listen to fans to an extent, but I think it's a very dangerous precedent to set when you just completely fall to the will of the fan base and not listen to reason. When you start talking about that game, Buffalo against the Kansas City Chiefs, there were many opportunities for the Buffalo Bills to win this game. And I think it flies in the face of defense. And I also think it flies in the face of player safety, because if you have an opportunity to end the game sooner, which would entail preserve the bodies of the guys that are on the field, why wouldn't you do that? Why would you now all of a sudden purposely extend the game by giving the other team another possession? Because now it changes the whole way you go about playing overtime. Now, if I'm the team that wins the coin toss, I'm deferring. I don't want the ball first. I want the ball second, because now I can sit back and see what the team first does, and then I can operate my system accordingly. So I think it sucks. This is one of those where this is a knee-jerk reaction by the NFL. They're constantly listening to the echoes of the fans and trying to appease the fans. And it's always been for years, Mike, offense puts butts in the seats, but defense wins championships. Now you're telling the entire league that really defense, hey, it's okay, but we really don't care about you guys. We just want to see the team's quarterback go out there and have an opportunity to play in that overtime. Never mind the 3 hours that they had to state their case on whether they were the best team of that day or not. This is participation trophy-ish, and I absolutely hate it.
Well, and here's the thing. What are you fixing? You're fixing, as you said, fan reaction to something that
Mike, it was a perfect game. It was the perfect game. Everybody was happy with the game.
But I'm saying, you take that aside, and I agree with you. If you're running a business, what do? You say, all right, you want to make a change in your business. Give me data. Give me something to look at to decide how I'm going to change this. And I'm reading right here on ESPN, since the current requirement for an opening possession touchdown was initiated in 2012, the teams winning the coin toss have won the games 50% of the time. So I'm not the smartest guy on this podcast, but that would lead me to believe that 50% of the time they didn't win the podcast. So you've got the balance that you say you want.
Mike,
so it's not
nobody ever. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say it's not like that number's 95%. Like there's just no way that the team that wins they never lose it. Okay, fine. Maybe you need to look at it at that point. It's 50-50 proposition based on their own data.
Mike, everybody felt great about that game. Everybody talked about that game for weeks after it was over. And not because Josh Allen didn't get a chance. It was because you had the play with Tyreek Hill right before to get it to overtime, and then you had to play to Travis Kelce in overtime. I mean, there were so many great plays, and Buffalo had so many chances from a defensive perspective to win the game. You had 13 seconds to stop the team from scoring the football, and you couldn't do it. Now you're basically telling them, hey, this is everybody gets a chance, everybody gets a trophy. We're just because Josh Allen didn't get a chance, this is not fair. Who cares? Josh Allen is just one player on a team of 53. He's not the only guy that is going to win that football game. It seems so unfair to me to put this all on one position, and because one guy didn't get a chance to play in overtime, everybody's losing their mind. It makes absolutely no sense, and I just think if you are a real purist as far as a fan of the NFL, the NFL took a step back in your eyes today.
And lastly, on the topic of the National Football League, in light of the Deshaun Watson signing, in Cleveland, where the grand jury in the Houston area decided that there would not be any criminal charges against him, I keep seeing these stories that bubble up. Jerry Jones, paternity suit. We don't have closure on the Washington Commanders situation. And I know you are going to agree with me, and I hate to throw softballs, but it just every time I look at this, it gets my mind. I think about this. It's like there's a double standard at work here. You know, it's like where's the fix for the Washington situation? Like it feels to me like they're going to brush this thing under the rug. Jerry Jones, like, you know, paternity suit, like, hey, no big deal, man. It's, you know, hey, I'm Jerry, like whatever. You know, and these are owners of two of the marquee franchises in the whole league, and they're at the table. I don't care what you tell me about Daniel Snyder's suspension and his wife is. Daniel Snyder is the owner. He is the representation of the Washington football team.
The Washington Commanders, Mike. Make sure we get that right. The Washington Commanders. They're not the football team anymore. But when you look at this is embarrassing yet again, but it just goes to show when you start talking about who has the money, they're going to be the ones that make all the decisions. And you can hate it all you want, but as long as those 32 guys are the only ones that have a seat at the table, this is going to continue to be all about them and how they can be pleased. And I know with Deshaun Watson, there's lots of people talking about they're canceling their season tickets to the Browns and all that kind of stuff. Good for you. You're making some sort of statement. Well, yeah, we're going to clap our hands for you, but you're an idiot because now there's going to be 5 other people and 5 other families fighting each other tooth and nail to get that season ticket that you just gave up. So I think about if the FBI couldn't find anything on Deshaun Watson, why are we still talking about this? I understand that it's a very delicate situation and there's still civil lawsuits to be worked out. But if the FBI, Mike, couldn't find anything worth charging, that's a pretty weak case. And I think for Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns, they're ready to move on. They're ready to have their new quarterback and have their own set of expectations for the 2022 season. And I think the sooner that they can get these issues resolved, not to say that it's not something of significance, but when those situations take care of themselves, you're going to look at the Cleveland Browns in a much different light than you would have about a week and a half ago.
And I know I said that was the last, but I got to give a real quick thing. I wrote this down and don't want to forget it. Anytime somebody wants to question or criticize a kid for leaving their respective university early to pursue a professional career where they actually get paid, I submit to you David Ojabo from the University of Michigan. You know, here's a kid that was supposedly going to be a top 10 pick, and he did everything right. Here's a kid that came to the United States, learned the game of football, and he's going through his pro day, and he tears his Achilles. And, you know, Achilles, I mean, modern medicine is a wonderful thing, but for an edge rusher, if I'm looking at a kid and I have a number 1 pick and I need an edge rusher, I'm passing because you don't know best case, he misses 6 to 12 months. So you can't spend a first-round draft pick on a kid that's not going to play. And worst case, he might not ever have that burst that he has right now. So don't ever ever question a kid for skipping his senior season, for skipping some second-rate bowl game in order to take care of his family, in order to make a living, I don't ever want to hear it again.
Mike, the biggest hypocrisy is that these kids owe something to the university. The university has made millions, maybe billions off of the names of these kids' backs and their image and likeness. And now all of a sudden everybody's losing their mind with NIL and all these other avenues where young men can start to monetize their value. Your heart breaks for the young man. And the thing that really upset me the most, Mike, was when it happened, nobody came to his side. They just moved the ball up 10 yards and kept on like it didn't happen. And I'm thinking, this is a guy that has been out there doing everything he could to make Michigan football look as good as it possibly could, and you couldn't even help him up in a situation where you see he's clearly down and not able to get himself up. That whole scene was just a bad look for me from a former player's perspective, to see that young man writhing in pain on the field and nobody going to his aid, and they just moved the ball up 10 yards. That triggered a lot of emotions for me, because I've seen that happen more times than I ever care to share, Mike. But you hope that he makes a full recovery and he's able to get back to football again. But it reminded me of Jalen Smith a few years ago when he played in the Fiesta Bowl at State Farm Stadium, where he was a projected top 5 pick and injures his knee, and of course he was able to come back and have a pretty decent career. But man, your heart just breaks for the young man, and I hope that he has a very speedy recovery and a full recovery.
And you hope, and I don't know the situation, the particulars, did he have the insurance lined up? But you never recover that money. Like if you go from a top 10 pick to the second round, you never recover that. Like, and you read out there now, coaches are saying, well, it doesn't really change my perception of the young man and things of that nature. And you hope it's right, but there's a lot of gamesmanship that goes on around the draft and that sort of thing. So I'm there with you. And I like I said, I don't ever want to hear it from people that question these guys when they step away for their own benefit. I got no patience for that whatsoever. All right, that's going to do it for segment number 1. We'll step aside here. We still got a lot of college basketball to get to. We've got to get to the NBA. And, of course, coming up at the very end of the podcast, we got Pump the Brakes. And due respect to our friends Giannis, we own dad jokes. Everybody getting in on you. I mean, here he is coming up to the podium. He's got a book, and he's like he just invented dad jokes. Come on.
Hey, dad jokes rule, and we're slowly taking over, Mike. It's one of those where you can't stop the bum rush. We're coming at you full speed ahead. No matter what you think about it, it's here, and we ain't going nowhere.
Jimmy Fallon and what's his name? Hashtag dad jokes rule. Justin Timberlake. God,
that's
I can't
right.
remember his name. All right, we'll step aside. Train and Grose. We'll be right back.
Train and Grose.
Welcome back in. Give us a follow on Twitter. Watch how we did this. At Train and Grose. Keep up to date with everything that's going on. But,
that's right.
NBA. Looking at my NBA standings, and now that the postseason is inching ever closer, all the teams seem to have X's and Y's next to them on the top half of these standings. But there's one certain team that's got a little asterisk next to it, which indicates clinched best league record, and that would be your Phoenix Suns, sitting currently at 61 and 14. B-Train, that's an 8-1-3 winning percentage as they get ready for a game probably in about 10 minutes or so our time here locally against the Golden State Warriors. And when we talked about this around Christmas time, we're like, hey, can't wait till the end of March. This is going to be a preview of some kind of something that we're going to see in the postseason. And it may still come to pass that it's a postseason matchup, but it does not take in shape the way we expected it would, like I said, around Christmas time of last year.
Well, the Phoenix Suns have done their part. They've held up their end of the bargain. You've seen this team really grow up and really take their stride, if you will, and really put the negativity from the ending of the season last year and really use that for motivation heading into this season. And they have picked up right where they left off from last year. And I think for Devin Booker, and for Monty Williams, they are two of the more underappreciated figures in all the NBA. We've heard players like Dame Lillard come out and say Devin Booker's my favorite player. You've heard Ja Morant say, don't sleep on Devin Booker. The players, the people within the NBA know about the Phoenix Suns, but from a national standpoint, I still think there's this, really, they're that good? Like, I just don't know. I mean, what do they have to do in order to convince the general public that they are a championship caliber team? This is a team that went to the finals last year and lost in 6 to the Milwaukee Bucks, but now they've piggybacked that with a best record in the league overall. And I think you could make a strong case for Devin Booker to not win the MVP, but he's got to be in the top 5 conversation as far as MVP. And when you start talking about Monty Williams, how in the world does he not get Coach of the Year after being robbed last year?
From our friends at Elias Sports Bureau, they make the case for you, B-Train. In 2017-18, the Suns had the worst record in the league at 21-61. And with this turnaround for the Suns, it's the third quickest. The team went from worst record to first or best record in NBA history. Only the Baltimore Bullets way back in the 60s and the Philadelphia Warriors a couple of years later did it quicker. And at that point, it was with a lot fewer teams in the NBA. So, the degree of difficulty, some would say, was not as difficult. And I look at this as kind of two different conversations. I mean, hands down for me, Monty Williams is got to be the Coach of the Year. I mean, I look at what Eric Spoelstra's doing in Miami, and it's nice, but the record here speaks for itself. The Devin Booker thing is tough, and it's not to take away from Booker, but it's been the conversation we've had for the last couple of years. You just have a situation where people are splitting the vote. Do you give it to Chris Paul? Do you give it to Devin Booker? And that's not fair, but I think that's the reality of the situation. When you're a voter and you have, 1, 2, 3, I don't know how far down they go on their ballots to determine who your NBA most valuable player is. You're like, man, you gotta do you split that Phoenix vote? And I think that's what's happening in a lot of cases. And again, it's not fair to Devin Booker. But it's the reality of what we've seen here, because Book's been here. Book's been, we've watched him grow up, but he went over and he pushed it over the top once Chris Paul got here. So again, taking nothing at all away from Devin Booker, and this is his team in the future. He's got to be it. And again, speaking of data and speaking of numbers, Monty Williams, according to the experts, is the odds-on favorite. He's minus 2,000. If you look at the odds to win it, next closest, thank you very much, Sean Crespin, is Eric Spoelstra at plus 700. So, if Monty Williams doesn't win this thing, we're going to have a recount or a whatever, would stop the steal or whatever we've been doing outside of sports and in politics. Monty Williams should be your NBA Coach of the Year, hands down.
So this is when media markets matter, because Mike, just imagine if you had the LA Lakers with the best record overall in the NBA. There is no way you wouldn't tell me LeBron James would not be the favorite for MVP. There's no way that you wouldn't tell me that their coach would not be Coach of the Year. There's no way that you would tell me that their best defensive player would not be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. When you have the best overall record, that means you've done the best of everybody, and they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. But for whatever reason, the Phoenix Suns do not get that same association. When you start talking about having by far and away the best record in all the league, Devin Booker should be MVP because Chris Paul wasn't there. Monty Williams should be Coach of the Year because he's done it back-to-back seasons. And then when you start looking at Defensive Player of the Year, how do you not give the Defensive Player of the Year to our guy? I mean, he's done everything that you've asked him to do, and the fact that they've got more wins than everybody else, their case should be a little bit stronger because their contributions have contributed to the best in all the league. Not one of the top, not a top 4, the absolute number 1 best record by far.
Let's put it this way, and I don't disagree with you because, we sit here and we watch it every night, And we remember that 3 years ago when it was the worst record in the National Basketball Association. But let's look at it this way, to your point about the media market or where this team is located. The Lakers one is tough for me, and the LeBron one is tough for me just because I think that's kind of at a different stratosphere because of history. Let's say that Devin Booker was drafted by the New York Knicks. And let's say that Devin Booker had a very similar career at the beginning as a New York Knick, where he was a great individual player. He dropped 70-something against the Celtics. You could see a star in the making as he grew up in front of your eyes. You probably would have seen more of him, honestly, if he was wearing a Knicks uniform. But let's say then that Chris Paul joined the Knicks at the same point he joined the Phoenix Suns and turned that franchise around. Let's say the story was exactly the same. It was just the Knicks and not the Suns. So you're playing in Madison Square Garden. You're playing in that media center. You're playing under the bright lights. Is the narrative different at the individual level in terms of what we're talking about? Does Chris Paul not overshadow Devin Booker if they're playing? And I don't even like the word overshadow. I'm going to correct myself. Take some of the spotlight away. Share the spotlight. Because let's face it, when LeBron's playing, nobody's sharing the spotlight with him. But if you had that same narrative in New York City, would it have been a different outcome for NBA Most Valuable Player?
I think it would have been, but I'll give you a better example, Mike. Let's go Golden State. Golden State is not the biggest media market out there, but you talk about Steph Curry and what he was able to accomplish in 2015 and 2016. He was the two-time MVP. There was Draymond Green, who was Defensive Player of the Year, but there was also a Klay Thompson, a guy who was a pretty good sharpshooter himself, and they had a lot of different role players. Andre Iguodala, who was the Finals MVP, and that bench with all of those names that they had with them. So I do believe if you have their success in a different media market, i.e. the biggest in New York, I think both of these guys are first-team All-NBA, no questions asked. I think you're talking about Monty Williams as one of the best ever coaches. I think the whole perception around him is different just because there's more attention to this team, and the fact that they would be in the Madison Square Garden, where it's the Mecca and you know, where basketball was created in a lot of people's eyes. Yeah, if they were to have that success in New York, it would look much different than it would here in Phoenix, no doubt.
The nice thing about it is whatever they might think, you know, in their own private thoughts, in the privacy of their own homes or on their drive home from the arena, it's not impacting this team at all. The chemistry is a wonderful thing. Chris Paul is out, and then he comes back, and they don't skip a beat. Chris Paul is back ahead of schedule, in fact, and they don't skip a beat. And, you know, that as a fan, you know, is, I think, the ultimate what you want to see, because you use the Steph Curry argument with that cast that he had with him up in the Bay Area. It's nice to have that conversation around a couple of championship rings. And I think that everybody in this conversation, whether it be fans, whether it be the team, I think would love the fact that we could argue and debate this while they roll up or roll down or unfurl the championship banner at the Footprint Center in downtown Phoenix. And you look around the National Basketball Association, we've been talking about this all year, going back to how we started this, the fact that the Suns and the Warriors are playing tonight. And we said, hey, look, this is going to be a two-team race in the Western Conference. And obviously the Suns have taken care of their business. Golden State struggling with injuries and other drama that you haven't seen with the Phoenix Suns. They've fallen back to third, a full 13 and a half behind the Suns. And it's really Memphis that's kind of hanging in there. And, you know, that's a team that, you know, when you say, do you want to see this team in the postseason? Clearly the Suns are a better team top to bottom than the Memphis Grizzlies. But this is a really fun team to watch. And talking about a star being born, what Ja Morant has done in his short NBA career is pretty impressive.
So, Mike, let me ask you this. Who is in your top five for MVP right now? Is Devin Booker in your top five for MVP?
Yeah, but absolutely he's in my top five. But I don't have, I don't have a vote, period. But I don't have that, you know, thing that that we talk about, that East Coast bias, the whatever you want to call it. You know, we see it, and that's what I said earlier when we were talking about it. We see it night in and night out. We see maybe the little things and hear the little things, the post-game, the detailed post-game press conferences, or, you know, when one of the local TV stations puts a microphone in front of his face after a practice, whatever the case may be. we're seeing those things. And so, for me, I suppose I'm jaded a little bit by that. But of course, he's absolutely in my top 5.
Mike, I would have to go Joel Embiid. I'd have to go Joker. I'd have to go Giannis. And then I go Devin Booker. I could even throw Ja Morant in there. And for what he's been able to do with that Memphis team, those are my top 5 candidates for MVP. And it'd be hard to argue. And you can put those names in a bowl and mix them up. And if you were to pull Ja Morant out of there, I wouldn't bat an eye. If I were to pull Devin Booker out of there, I wouldn't bat an eye. But I think a month and a half ago, if you would have had that listing as far as MVP, it was Joel Embiid and everybody else. But the Joker has come on like gangbusters. Yeah. I look at Giannis and what he was able to do even last night against Joel Embiid and the 41 points performance that he put out there. That's impressive. So it does matter what you do down the stretch and having those moments, those MVP moments between now and the end of the season. I think Devin Booker has an opportunity to put his name even more so in the ring, if you will. But I don't think that they care one bit. I think at this point they're about championship or bust. The individual accolades are great and they're fine, but I think they're more set on getting back to that finals and righting what went wrong last year.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think, as I said, as a fan, that's a good thing. We can have that conversation around, did he get screwed? Should he been, more votes, whatever. But like I said, I'll take the Golden State way. It'd be nice to do it watching them unfurl a championship banner at the Footprint Center in downtown Phoenix. We talked a lot about it, though, like, what are we looking forward to? And there's so many ways to look at this. The Lakers continue to implode. If the season ended right now, they wouldn't even be in a play-in game. So whatever's going on there, they're out of the equation. The Clippers are an interesting one because they're on the cusp of not being in, the play-in games. And maybe they're getting some guys back and they might be as healthy as they've been all year as the postseason starts. I mentioned Memphis and Ja Morant, and then Golden State. Will they get it together before the postseason starts? That's all in the West. I mean, we haven't even jumped over to the East. I mean, there's just all kinds of great questions and great subplots in the Eastern Conference. Utah, who is, they were talking about how, they missed their opportunity a year ago. They're all the way falling down to 6 now in the West. So just a lot of shuffling, a lot of turmoil. And the way this thing has played out in the West is not, I think, what a lot of people expected at the start of the season.
Yeah, I think the fact that they've lost 5 straight all on the road as far as the Utah Jazz are concerned, there's a lot of frustration brewing within that team. I think rightfully so. If you've lost 5 and you're supposed to be playing your best basketball down the stretch, that's going to be very, very interesting to see how that all unfolds. But I look at New York, and I look at the Brooklyn Nets, and they're a team that they seem to be teetering on. Are they going to be in the play-in tournament, or are they going to be a 6 seed? Like, where are they going to fall? The fact that New York lifted the ban for COVID for players who weren't vaccinated, which allows Kyrie Irving to play every game now, I think that gives them a big shot in the arm. I don't know if it gives them a championship advantage, because I think they've had to cover too much ground or make up too much ground in a short period of time. But it will be interesting if you are a team that is at the top of the conference, like a Milwaukee or a Miami or a Philadelphia, whoever, or Boston, whoever comes out on top, to have to go and play the Brooklyn Nets in the first round with a healthy Kyrie and a healthy Kevin Durant, and they're able to play every single game. That's going to make for a very interesting matchup. And I think teams are going to be trying to get away from that 8th seed or that number 1 overall seed, because you're going to have a team in Brooklyn who's going to probably have to fight to get in, and they'll already be in playoff mode.
Well, that's it, right? Because it looks like, mathematically it's going to be really difficult for them to avoid the play-in game. So, the fact that they get a couple extra games at full complement might not necessarily be a bad thing for the Brooklyn Nets. You look at the top of the East, and we've been saying it all along, is Miami going to hang on? Is Miami going to hang on? And they're fighting it out with Milwaukee right now. But, go back to, again, it's always a comparison to what we see here day in and day out with the Phoenix Suns, the drama around some of these teams. And we saw last week Jimmy Butler and Udonis Haslem getting into it on the sideline, and then all of a sudden Eric Spoelstra's in the middle of it. And then after that, Eric Spoelstra takes a day off. He took a game off for personal reasons, didn't travel with the team. And so, on the one hand, you're like, what's this drama around this team? And then on the other side of it, it makes you appreciate what Monty Williams is doing with the Phoenix Suns that much more. That you don't have that, because every team has personalities. If you're playing in the National Basketball Association, you're the best of the best, and with that comes a certain amount of ego. But the fact that this team has figured out how to check it, and again, looking at it in comparison to what's going on in Miami, it's really refreshing, I guess, for Phoenix Suns fans just to sit back and watch it happen elsewhere. But Miami, they're at the top, but they're hanging on by a thread right now.
Yeah, Mike, I do believe that it is a better situation here in Phoenix, but I do think, too, if the Miami Heat are winning those games as opposed to losing those games, I don't think you're seeing a lot of these situations play out the way that they are. Winning, again, cures all illnesses. And whatever you've got going on, if you're able to still keep it together and win in the end, then I think all's well that ends well. And I think for Jimmy Butler, he's a guy that's going to be fiery. He's had to fight for it. There is no doubt that the circumstances have a lot to do with the discontent, if you will, in Miami. But you also like those kind of teams that they kind of play on the edge, and they're going to be battle tested and ready come playoffs because they're not going to be scared or shocked by anything.
Well, Dwayne Wade agrees with you. He said he sent Eric Spoelstra a text, said, like what I saw, looks like you guys are gearing up for the playoffs. So Dwayne Wade is on board with your way of looking at that.
Yeah,
all right, real quickly.
They're all following the Pat Riley tree.
There you go. Real quickly, if you're the Miami Heat, one team you do not want to see in the NBA, in the first round or the opening round of the Eastern Conference. I think you touched on a minute ago, but if you're the Heat, who don't you want to see?
Oh, you don't want to see the Brooklyn Nets at all. Like that is a horrible matchup for you because, for one, there's no answer for Kevin Durant. I mean, nobody in the league has an answer for Kevin Durant. He's the best player in the world, and he is very difficult. He's impossible to stop. You only hope that he misses because you're not going to block a shot. He's got handles. He's got vision. There's no weakness in his offensive game. He is almost the perfect player from an offensive standpoint.
And if you're the Suns, do you care based on what you've seen from them out of, I don't know how many games we're at right now, 75 games. Do you care? I mean, I look at this and say, there's nobody when I look down in that bottom half of the Western Conference that I'm like, man, whatever, let's just avoid them at all costs. There's nothing out there that worries me if I'm the Phoenix Suns right now. Maybe that's not a good way to look at it, but
yeah, no, Mike, I look at the bottom of the Western Conference, and you're talking about teams like Utah, like Dallas, and those teams don't match up with everything that Phoenix throws at you. And the fact that they've got guys that can play at every position and really could be a matchup nightmare, there's no need to fear. And when you start talking about Monty Williams, a coach that has shown that he has the ability to adjust in game and find those matchups that are favorable and exploit them. And you got a floor general like Chris Paul, you're not going to be out of any game. You don't fear anything. And if everybody comes out and does what they're supposed to do, to borrow from Bill Belichick, do their job, then I think this Phoenix Suns team is going to be just fine.
To the contrary, if there's one team we could see, I'd like to see the Suns and the Timberwolves, so the Suns could do to the Timberwolves in a series what they did to them in that last game in Minneapolis. I forget, it was about a week or so ago. I don't know what the Timberwolves were thinking, acting up against the top seed team with the best record in the NBA, and they had a lead in that game, and then they got full of themselves as a team that's struggling just to make the playoffs. What's the old saying? You tug on Superman's cape. So let's give a full series of the Suns swatting at the Timberwolves and putting them out of their misery. How's that?
Oh, I would love that. And, I mean, of course, you have the backdrop of Karl Anthony Towns and Devin Booker being old teammates at Kentucky. Yeah. Of course, they're going to jaw at each other, and there's that competitive type of fervor there between the two of them. So there's lots of storylines with the Timberwolves. But I think ultimately the Suns, I don't see them having too difficult of a time until you get to the conference finals.
Agreed. What they do, they put up 42 points in the final quarter against the Timberwolves just to put an exclamation point on a game towards the end of a road trip when they had absolutely nothing to play because they virtually sewed everything up. And they're like, do not, like to little brother, do not even bring this to me. 42 points. Now go to your locker room and be quiet.
Absolutely. I love it. I mean, I love the attitude, and they've taken the tone of Monty Williams as well as Chris Paul. And those are two great guys to take the attitude from, and they've shown everywhere they go, good things happen. All
right. Coming up on the other side, March Madness coming to a final, a crescendo. We've got the Final Four all set. We'll talk about that next on Train and Grose.
Train and Grose.
So if you were filling out your bracket and you're trying to decide, as me, how to fill it out, pick all the teams you don't like as your Final Four. Mm-hmm. And I think I would have been in good shape. Duke, can't stand you. North Carolina, got nothing for you. Kansas, same with you. Villanova, I don't really dislike Villanova necessarily, but Villanova's been so good under Jay Wright. You should assume that Villanova is going to be in the Final Four. Like whatever this team is doing, they're a 2 seed, but they are that good. They are so fundamentally sound, and they've been doing it for so long. Pick against them at your own peril. But your Final Four matchup coming up this weekend from New Orleans, your early game is Villanova and Kansas. You got a 2 seed Villanova against a 1 seed Kansas, and then the late game is the ACC matchup that I guess a lot of people want to see. Duke and North Carolina, number 2 Blue Devils, number 8 Tar Heels. They're the late game from New Orleans. And subplot, and Sean, jump in here on this. I know you and B-Train were talking about it before we started recording. There is a local angle with the Jayhawks, and it's a good story. You're happy. At least I am. I know it stings a little bit if you're a Sun Devil fan, but Remy Martin getting a lot of positive play, and really, you can see how much respect he has as Kansas has made this run. Listen to the announcers, listen to the media talk about Remy Martin and what he's done as a Jayhawk this year.
Yeah, and as I was telling you guys during one of the breaks, it's almost like his career's gone full circle, because Sun Devil fans will remember his breakout party was really that game against Kansas when the Sun Devils went there and upset the Jayhawks on their home floor. And he had a huge second half. He was coming off the bench for the Devils at the time. He's a freshman with just all this energy, right? And now here he is playing for Kansas and going to a Final Four. So to say it doesn't sting would be lying to you, right? I mean, you're seeing one of your own go to the Final Four and drop 20 points in back-to-back games. And but he's one of those guys you can't help but root for. Incredibly just always humble, really down to earth, great kid. Every time we had him on the post-game show, his family was always around, excellent people. Like, you just can't help but root for him. But if I'm going to sit here and be real with you guys, does it make you feel some kind of way if you're a Sun Devil fan? Absolutely it does, watching him on that kind of stage and not quite having that success. So when he was with the Devils. But it is what it is. You can't help but root for the guy. He's one of those personalities, and all the best for him. At the same time, having said that I said it stings a little bit. I think you are rooting for him if you're a Sun Devil fan. I think you're rooting for Kansas. I mean, you don't have any issues with the Jayhawks, right? I mean, heck, you've beat them the last 2 times you played them. But I think you're rooting for Remy if you're a Sun Devil fan right now.
I look at this Final Four, and I think it's blue blood, and I think Villanova has become a true blue blood in college basketball. Yeah. Of the last 5 championships, they've won 2 of them. And Jay Wright has solidified himself as one of the great coaches in college basketball. And I think there's such a storyline around Coach K being his last run and getting to the Final Four, and they've never played Duke in an NCAA tournament. So the fact that you have two schools separated by 5 miles, 8 miles, now playing on a national stage against each other as arch rivals, I mean, you couldn't script that. I mean, I think Hollywood would have probably rejected that storyline and like, are you kidding me? No way. But that's where we are. And I think if Coach K is able to pull this off, this is one of the greatest send-offs you will ever hear about in the history of sports. I really believe that. A guy that has been that successful as a coach in the NCAA, level to accomplish what he's accomplished with USA basketball as well, and to in his final season to go out the same way as John Wooden. I just think that would be one of the best stories that you could ever write, and I don't think anybody, as much as I don't like Duke, even I would have to be like, okay, that's kind of cool that he's going out like that.
Well, and I think the other thing too is I think Coach K is part of a kind of a dying breed of coaches in that he said he briefly considered leaving Duke on 2 occasions during that long tenure. And, the idea that you would be hired by a Duke or a Michigan State or a Kansas, fill in the blanks with, the blue blood term, because you're exactly right. Guys aren't going to do that anymore. Guys aren't going to stay. They'll be the lure of the NBA. They'll be impatient boosters, whatever it is. And so to see a guy that stays there as long as he's been there, I don't think that's going to be something you see much, if at all, in the future. I don't see how it happens. The game has changed too much, not always for the better, but it's changed too much. And I don't think you're going to see a lot of Coach K's going forward. So, when you had Tom Izzo and Mike Krzyzewski matching up against each other in the Sweet 16, there was a big storyline around that. Like, hey, here's 2 guys who have been at it for a long time, have had much success, and have stayed in their places. And I don't think you see a lot of that going forward.
Mike, the thing that I love so much about this game between North Carolina and Duke is the fact that, one, as you just talked about, you may not see that, but you also see in North Carolina the succession plan actually working out in their favor. Hubert Davis replaces a great legendary coach in Roy Williams, a guy who had a lot of success going back to North Carolina and being a long-term coach there. So the fact that they are rivals in and of themselves, and you see a succession plan in place that is working brilliantly, you have to look no further than 8 miles down the road, Old Tobacco Road, and see how North Carolina has made that transition look so smooth and effortless. And you only hope that Shire can come in and do the similar type of job that Hubert Davis has done, replacing a legend in Roy Williams, and what he's going to have to do with Coach K.
No, that's a really fair point. And, replacing a legend is never easy. And it'll be interesting to see how much runway the Duke boosters and the Duke administration give if they do stumble out of the chute a little bit. Yeah, but that's a really good point. And again, that tie-in between Duke and North Carolina looms large, even in this type of scenario. So we'll see. And the emotion that you saw from Hubert Davis as his team knocked off St. Peter's and got his spot in the Final Four, that was real. And I think it would exactly what you just described. It was probably an emotion. It was happiness, sure, but I am guessing that there is a certain amount of pressure, whether it be from the outside or whether that he put upon himself to say, look, I played here. I'm replacing a legend, and I want, in some respect, you want to make them forget Roy Williams, and he did it. To take them to the Final Four. And you look at this again, as we said, it's a blue blood, a gathering of blue bloods to be sure. But North Carolina, let's not forget, is an 8 seed. We're not talking about 4 number ones rolling into New Orleans. There was a certain amount of upset, if that's the way you want to use, if you get an 8 all the way in to the Final Four. So I love the emotion. I love the fact that he had to compose himself to do that interview on TV immediately after the game.
Mike, I think the overwhelming sentiment that Hubert Davis felt in that moment was relief. Relief that he was able to uphold the standard and validate his stamp on that program. Because if he hadn't gotten to a Final Four, it would have forever been Roy Williams looking over his shoulder, casting that shadow. And, of course, him being at the games, people were going to always focus their attention on Roy Williams. And I think for Shire, he's seeing that, and he's like, man, that just puts even more pressure on me. I've got to go and make this thing happen, because I've seen our arch rival have that success in a very short period of time. Now I've got to do the same thing because, Coach K, even though he may not be the guy in that seat, he's still going to be a figure around that organization and that program. And he'll still be at the games just like Roy is at North Carolina. And if they don't come out the way that they would hope to come out and win the way that they expect to win, then of course there's going to be that Coach K, come back, Coach K, come back. Or did they make the right decision as far as who was going to be the successor for Coach K at Duke?
Tommy Amaker, line one. Tommy Amaker, line one. Because
that was still a shock. That's still a shock, Mike.
Yeah, I'm with you. And, apparently, if you're to believe the media reports, it was not an easy decision and not all parties loved the decision. But it was hard either way when a guy steps away after that long. Meanwhile, the run of St. Peter's, tiny St. Peter's College from New Jersey, ended against North Carolina, but it was a historic run and it was an amazing run. Their head coach is cashing in. Shaheen Holloway is named the head coach at Seton Hall, like a lot of people thought he would be, a place where he played, a place where he shined, and a place where they need him now to kind of see if they can resurrect that program on the Big East stage back to where it was. But he steps away after doing the impossible at St. Peter's. And I love the stories that come out of, these small schools when they go on the big runs, and talking about the fact that St. Peter's, their entire athletic budget was not as much as John Calipari's annual salary at Kentucky. Talking about the fact that, they could not afford to bring the St. Peter's cheerleaders to Indianapolis for the opening round until one of their corporate sponsors stepped in and put them on a plane and let the cheerleaders go to Indianapolis. About the fact that they had to cancel games as recently as last year because of broken pipes in their old gym. To see what Coach Holloway has done and to see him now rewarded for that, I think is an amazing story and a nice byproduct of this Final Four run. A team that beat Kentucky, a team that beat Murray State, and a team that beat Purdue. And you look at Purdue throwing 2 7-footers at you, and these little scrappy players from New York and New Jersey come out and beat them to make it to the Elite Eight, in the opening round of the Elite Eight to go to Sweet 16 to go to the Elite Eight was nothing short of remarkable.
Yeah, Mike, and you start talking about great stories. The fact that Shaheen Holloway was actually in the McDonald's All-Star game with Kobe Bryant and was the MVP of that game. You hear these fascinating stories like that, and you don't know a Shaheen Holloway unless he's having that success on the national stage. So I thought it was a great run for him and St. Peter's, and the fact that he was able to give them a little shine and at the same time get back to his alma mater and have a chance at resurrecting them. It's a win-win for everybody involved.
Well, and again, his story, the fact that, as you said, he was on the court with Kobe Bryant and was the MVP and was, by all accounts, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I remember this, but when he was playing at Seton Hall, he took a team that was struggling then and put them back on the national scene. And then at the end of his career, similar to what we were talking about earlier, he blew out his Achilles and was never able to get the NBA career that everybody expected him to have because, again, he's 45 now. So medicine back then, like it was 100 years ago, but medicine 20 years ago even was not what it is now. And he was known for his quickness. He was known for that first step. And, if you can't deliver that to the NBA, it didn't pay off. But again, credit to him. He went back to school, finished his degree, and turned it into this. And now he's back at his alma mater, and really, he's the next Hubert Davis. Maybe he takes Seton Hall back to the days we remember of P.J. Carlesimo and when Seton Hall was in that conversation with Georgetown and St. John's and some of those other Big East schools that have fallen by the wayside over the last number of years.
Yeah. Just a great story all the way around. And every year we're blessed to get these type of stories. And it's why you allow the little guy a seat at the table, because you just never know when they can catch fire and make that magical run. You don't have to get to the Final Four to be one of those memorable stories, and everybody's not going to be Loyola Chicago and Florida Gulf Coast and do, you know, some of the unthinkables. But I think for the next few years, people are going to remember St. Peter's for how they were able to just take the whole entire tournament by storm and make people believe in the little guy and root for the underdog yet again.
No, completely agree with you. And, you know, it's why March Madness is so good. And TV ratings back it up. I never understand this. And I guess, you know, the fact that cable TV and all that, you know, when was the last time you watched true TV other than 3 weeks in March and April? Or, you know, even TBS TNT, unless you're watching a movie rerun, they got all the games on and all these stories, and the TV ratings are up again this year. And I think you give a lot of credit to stories like St. Peter's. I mean, again, the Blue Bloods, sure, they're going to get their numbers, but people love an underdog. People love those stories that St. Peter's was able to deliver all the way to the Elite Eight. All right, B-Train, that's it. No, you got something else?
I'm good.
All right. It's all a lead up, like we always say every week when we're recording Training Gross. It's all a lead up to Pump the Brakes and to dad jokes. I don't know. Again, we're in our respective home bases today as we record this. So I don't know if Sean Crespin made the research staff come to his house and deliver the final list of Pump the Brakes. That's going to work out. But we got that coming up as well as dad jokes. Stick with us. You're listening to Training Gross. Welcome back in. You know the music. I know the music. We love the music. That means it's time for Pump the Brakes. That's when Sean Crespin jumps in and rapid fire takes us through the questions that are submitted by the crack research staff here at Train and Gross. Sean Crespin, what do you got for us?
Yes, sir. So I'm going to give you some statements. For those of us joining us for the first time, some statements on the world of sports, little pop culture. You tell me if you're pumping the brakes on it or if you're rolling with it. So here we go. Your first one, Bruce Arians. You guys talked about it in the first segment of today's show, calling it quits. So you look back at his career with the Arizona Cardinals, 61% winning percentage. Of coaches with 50-plus games coached for the Cardinals, the closest to that 61% winning percentage is Coach Wisenhunt at just 46%. However, you did go just 1-2 in the postseason with Bruce Arians. So pump the brakes or not, Bruce Arians belongs in the Cardinals' Ring of Honor.
I'll pump the brakes. We talk about personality. We talk about bringing a sense of change of culture, but ultimately you're judged by wins in the postseason. And when you have lost more than you've won and you only played in 3 games, that's not Ring of Honor-ish. And so you give a tip of the cap to a Bruce Arians, but for what he did in Arizona, I'm not sure if that's worthy of the Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I'm pumping the brakes as well. And, you know, as you said, Sean, we talked about it earlier. You know, I mean, you think back on the years that Bruce Arians was here, and the only downside of that is that postseason record, right? I mean, you look at it, and everything else was amazing. His candor, the way he talked to the media, the way he talked to and about his players. You didn't always agree with it. Sometimes you cringed. The results during the regular season. Yeah, all of it. But, you know, the postseason, and you mentioned Ken Wisenhunt, his overall winning percentage, I think you said, Sean, around 47%. Ken Wisenhunt, I'm guessing, if you look at the postseason record, is probably well over 500, just as a postseason record. So, you know, I don't think he belongs in the Ring of Honor either. You can't be if you're under 500 as a regular season coach, and you can't be if B-Train doesn't like you. So you're not in the Ring of Honor for that reason. So pump the brakes. BA, you're not in my Ring of Honor if I'm the Arizona Cardinals.
For those scoring at home, Wisenhunt 4-2 in 6 postseason games, went 4-2 with the Arizona Cardinals.
See, now if Bruce Arians would have put a 4-2 mark in the postseason up, maybe we're having a different conversation, even if it doesn't mean winning the big game. But sub 500 in the postseason, I can buy that.
Let's keep it in the NFC West. Baker Mayfield will be a Seahawk this coming September.
I'm not pumping the brakes on that. I think that is his only place that he has a chance to be a starting quarterback because, again, the game of musical chairs for quarterbacks went round and round, and he was the one left without a seat if the Seattle Seahawks don't want his services. I don't think that they have their current quarterback for the future on their roster. But for Baker Mayfield, for everything that's been said, I still think he's a top 30 quarterback in the NFL. I don't think that there's 32 quarterbacks better than Baker Mayfield. I don't think he's better than maybe 20 of them, but I still think he has enough on his resume that says if given another opportunity, I think he can take an organization further than what they've been in the past.
Yeah, I'm not pumping the brakes on that either. Or I am pumping the brakes. Sometimes I get distracted when I'm trying to think of my answer.
You're not.
I could very easily see Baker Mayfield as the quarterback of the Seahawks. The question for me is, how does it happen? Because if you're the Seahawks, even with Baker Mayfield, you're not going to be any damn good next year. So what are you going to give up to get Baker Mayfield? You got a nice haul from the Denver Broncos to help you rebuild your future. And how much better are you going to be with Baker Mayfield as your quarterback, as opposed to, I don't know, is it Drew Lock right now? Is he number one?
Drew Lock.
Okay, so he's number one on the depth chart. How many more wins does Baker Mayfield give you over Drew Lock if you're the Seahawks with the way you're structured right now? I think the draft capital is more important to keep if you're the Seahawks, and just wait it out to see if the Browns ultimately have to give Baker Mayfield away.
Yeah, and that's the question. What's the price tag look like for a Baker Mayfield? Because I think he's only 26 years old, so he's a young quarterback still. So it's not like you're looking at wins just next year. If you feel like you can win with the guy, then maybe you roll the dice on him. I think it really boils down to what's that price tag going to look like on a Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be too high because, one, they flirted with Deshaun Watson. He said no at first and then came back after they gave him $230 million guaranteed. So the market and the asking price for Baker Mayfield can't be that high because the Browns have already played their hand when they were openly courting Deshaun Watson and saying that, hey, we're everything is open. So I don't think that they're going to have to give up a huge ransom to get his services. And I think if you can get him on the cheap, I think he can wind up being a steal because this is a guy that was the number one overall pick in the draft and a former Heisman Trophy winner.
So lots of talk.
By the way,
sorry, go ahead, Grose.
So real quickly on that, by the way, this whole Deshaun Watson contract is causing trouble in the AFC North. The Ravens are like, gee, what do we do now? Because we know we got to deal with this. But this deal that Cleveland gave Deshaun Watson is making our life really difficult right now. So, if you're the Cleveland Browns, you're sitting back, give yourself another pat on the back for this move.
It's not even just the Ravens in the NFC North, Gross. There's reports with, because they got the owners' meetings going on and the coaches, conventions and all that going on right now around the NFL. And there's reports of people in high-ranking positions saying that the Browns have completely changed the finances of the NFL moving forward. Completely. You've reset the entire game because that contract fully guaranteed is absolutely unheard of. And you're right, it's Lamar Jackson. It's the Kyler Murrays, who's not going to be on that level, but just every quarterback who was looking at a contract coming, it's now elevated to another level, regardless if you're top tier or not.
You know what that means?
Hello. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, you know what that means? It means the players are going to have to get locked out by the owners until the owners can fix that. Because that's the only way the owners can save themselves.
Yeah. But what that also means, they don't even have to go any further than their division. Hello, there's a young guy in Cincinnati who just showed if you can build a team around him, he can make some things happen. You think he's going to ask for less than Deshaun Watson money? I don't think so.
Right. I'm with you. Let's keep it with quarterbacks. There's a lot of talk about Deshaun Watson. Obviously, a lot of talk about Russell Wilson, the impact they're going to have moving elsewhere. Kind of under the radar is Carson Wentz. Pump the brakes or not, Carson Wentz makes the Washington Commanders a playoff team next year.
Pump the brakes. Can we just officially just say Carson Wentz is not the Carson Wentz of 2017. He's not that guy. That guy's not walking through the door. 3 different organizations have tried to see post-2017 Carson Wentz, and it has not worked out well for any of those teams. Now, Washington is the latest to have their crack at trying to figure Carson Wentz out. But if Indianapolis, after a year and seeing how he was not able to get that team over the hump, a team that was really built for the playoffs and had made the playoffs the season before with an aging quarterback in Phillip Rivers, how in the world is he more valuable now? And if you're the Washington Commanders, how do you think that he's going to command the huddle and be a guy that can lead this team to where they want to go?
Mm-hmm. Is that dad jokes already?
Mm-hmm. Listen, you look at the Commanders, though. They lost 4 games last year by 1 score, and their quarterback situation was absolutely atrocious.
No. Pump the brakes as well. Look, you want to know what's going on. You want to know what's going on. You trust Las Vegas. And when Washington traded for Carson Wentz, their odds of making the playoffs actually got worse. So that's what Las Vegas thinks of this. He is who we thought he was, or something like that.
Oh.
All right. To the NBA we go. You briefly touched on them, Grose, the Lakers. And right now, as we sit and record this show on March 30th, they are out of even the play-in situation in the Western Conference. So, if the Lakers do miss the playoffs, they should hit the reset button. That includes getting what they can for one LeBron James.
Mike?
He passes the mic.
No, you got to blow it up, and you don't move LeBron James easily, and you don't move LeBron James without his permission. But as bad as it is, does he want to be part of this any longer? I mean, and we talked about it last time. The problem with that team, and there's a lot. To me, it's Anthony Davis. That's the real problem with this team. You cannot count on your superstar in the waiting. And, again, I just said it a minute ago. At some point, he can tell you, well, no, I know I need to be healthy. I know I need to work harder in the offseason. Dude, you're getting into old status by NBA standards. You are who you are, and you're not going to change. And so, no, you do what you can. And yeah, LeBron needs to be in the conversation. I'm sure if you could find a good spot and he could find a good spot, he'd probably go willingly. But it's got to be over.
B-Train?
Yeah, I don't think LeBron James is the piece that you want to move. I think Anthony Davis is the piece that you want to move, because we know that the tread on the tire of one LeBron James is just about bald. We appreciate what he's doing, and we appreciate the effort that he's given in his later years, and he's already said he wants to play with his son Bronny. But if there is a tradable asset on this roster, it's Anthony Davis. And even though he hasn't been available and he seems to be Humpty Dumpty to some degree, he's still one of the better talents in the NBA when healthy. And if you can find the right mix, and find the right trade partner, then I think you can make something happen with Anthony Davis. But you're not trading LeBron James and it go over well. That's not going to happen.
Anthony Davis hasn't played since February 16th. Anthony Davis, if you put together last year and this year, barely played a full NBA season. So I don't. And if playing alongside one of the all-time greats in LeBron James in Los Angeles couldn't motivate Anthony Davis to take care of himself, to take care of his business, to get himself to the point where he can show up and play every night. Yeah, if you can find that place, I'd love to see what it is and bottle me up some of it and send it my way, because, like I said, Anthony Davis is at this point what he is. Remember when he came, everybody's like, oh, it's rigged. They're fixing it. Like Anthony Davis and LeBron together, unstoppable for what they won the bubble year. But other than that, what have they done?
And remember, the only reason they won in the bubble year was because they had a long break of inactivity. And so Anthony Davis was able to be rested by the time they got to the bubble and play in a shortened season.
Absolutely.
To pop culture we go. He got in one little fight and America got scared. Pump the brakes or not, Will slapping Chris for a joke about Jada's hair.
Pump the brakes. I believe Will Smith has serious anger issues. That whole situation is disturbing. And I think whatever is going on with Will, this is a culmination of years and years of something brewing inside of Will Smith. I don't know all of the particulars, but the things that I do know is the situation that he has with Jada Pinkett. I don't know if it's necessarily a good look. And we've talked about how she's put out their laundry at that table that, her show that she does. No self-respecting man is going to take that type of information well. And I think he's taken it as well as he's could over the years. But I think that statement from Chris Rock, even though it wasn't the best joke in the world, it shouldn't have been enough to garner that type of reaction. I think this was a ticking time bomb, and I'm really concerned about Will Smith and his mental health going forward.
I'd agree with that. I completely agree with that because it looked like a dude that just didn't know how to react. He was laughing at
He's
first.
unraveling. He unraveled.
Yeah.
He unraveled.
Yeah. And unfortunately for him, it's it's not like us when we unravel. It was on international TV. So just an unfortunate situation overall. Grose?
No, I'm right there. I mean, and the idea that, at first, the first shot of Will Smith was he was laughing, and then he got the look from his wife, and then he flipped. I think B-Train's spot on. There's a lot going on there. And yeah, you are absolutely right to say what you said about, what's his mental state, where's he at? And, again, it's funny on social media, right? I mean, you see a lot of that stuff flying around, but to understand, what it's like to live under a microscope, like a celebrity does, again, not making excuses for anybody and their actions. I mean, you got to own it at some level, but it's like I said, it was funny on social media, but I think you scratch the surface and there's a lot to be concerned about there. Every week, the final crescendo, this is how we wrap it up. Often imitated, never duplicated. B-Train and dad jokes. Take it away.
Yeah. All right, fellas. Here we go. There can be 100 people in the room, and 99 of them will not slap you, but one will.
Okay. I find it funny. He gives that a round of applause. But after your response to the question about Will, and I played a little, when I asked the question, I played off the theme song. I felt bad about that because you went to the mental health portion of it. Yeah. And then you hit us with that funny, that was good. It was good, but I don't know how to feel about it. Grose?
Well, I know, my immediate impression when I saw it is, Will Smith hit Chris Rock, and I said, man, he left some Fresh Prince on him, man. So,
oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, buddy. And I didn't think that was funny either. I didn't think it was funny either, but B-Train made me say it.
I love the hooray. It's doing the hooray. Oh, man. All right. On that note,
thanks for tuning in. Tell your friends. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And as always, follow us on Twitter at Train and Grose. Next week, we do a deep dive into the 2022 Houston Astros on episode 67 of Train. That's coming up. We'll see you next time.
We'll holla.